Nobody makes Kim Jae-won wait. Not presidents. Not rivals. Not the three men who tried to kill him and failed. But a waitress in a yellow apron told him his table was taken, and he sat down in someone else's section and waited 40 minutes without a word. His entire security detail didn't know what to do with that. Neither did she. Because here's the thing about Deja Collins. She can read anyone who walks through that door in 30 seconds flat. She read him on day one. She just didn't want to know what she found. This is the story of two people who built their whole lives around never needing anyone, and one Thursday morning table that quietly dismantled everything. If this story already has you curious, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Like this video, drop a comment telling me what you think is going to happen, share it with someone who loves a good story, and subscribe because it's the support from you that makes it possible to bring stories like this one to life. Now, let's begin. The diner was loud before the sun finished rising. That was the thing people never understood about the early shift. It wasn't quiet and slow the way mornings were supposed to be. By 6:45 the grill was already running. Marcus in the back calling out times through the kitchen window with the particular energy of a man who communicated exclusively through controlled frustration. The coffee machine, the good one, the one that actually worked, was making its warning sound again, which meant Deja would spend the next 4 hours explaining to customers that the other machine made perfectly acceptable coffee and no, she could not personally fix the first one before their order was ready. She tied her apron in the back hallway the way she tied it every morning, twice around, double knot, the same way her grandmother taught her, and stood for exactly 3 seconds with her eyes closed before she walked out onto the floor. 3 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. Then she pushed through the door and became Deja Collins, waitress, the woman who could run a 6-table section short-staffed during a Sunday brunch rush without losing a single order or her mind, and she was fine. She was always fine. Table 2's asking about the French toast, Janelle said, appearing at her elbow with the specific urgency of someone who had been waiting for backup. Janelle was 23 and kind-hearted and talked more than anyone Deja had ever met, which in a diner was either an asset or a liability, depending entirely on the customer. Tell them 15 minutes, Deja said, already moving. And refill the coffee at table 6 before Mrs. Washington asks. She's already on her second look. How do you know she's on her second look? You just walked in. Because she's always on her second look by 6:50. Go. Janelle went. Deja moved through her section with the ease of someone who had been doing this long enough that the work lived in her body and not her head. Refilling, checking, smiling at Mr. Patterson in his usual booth, confirming Marcus's timeline on the French toast, wiping down the counter at table 4, because the busing had missed a spot, and she could see it from across the room. Table 4 was her table. Not officially. She didn't own tables, nobody owned tables. But in the 4 years she had been at Carol's Diner, table 4 had always landed in her section. And she had stopped questioning it the way you stopped questioning anything that simply became true through repetition. It was a good table. Window adjacent, caught the morning light right, seated for comfortably but felt intimate at 2. The kind of table where people had conversations they didn't plan to have. Deja had heard proposals at table 4 and breakups, and one memorable Tuesday where a man had sat down intending to eat alone and ended up crying into his eggs while she refilled his coffee 3 times and said nothing except the things that needed saying. She was good at knowing what needed saying. She was better at knowing when to say nothing at all. Miss Carol came out of the back office at 7 sharp, the way she did every morning, moving through the diner with the unhurried warmth of a woman who had built this place with 30 years of early mornings and stubborn love. She was 61 and small, and had the handshake of someone twice her size and the memory of someone who had never once forgotten a regular's order. How's the machine? Miss Carol asked, stopping beside Deja at the counter. Same. Marcus says he knows a guy. Marcus always knows a guy. The guy never shows up. Miss Carol smiled the tired smile of someone who had been having this conversation for 3 years. The usual crowd coming in this morning? Already started. Deja nodded toward the window booths filling up with the predictable rhythm of a Thursday. Mr. Patterson with his newspaper. The retired teacher, Mrs. Chun, already calculating her 15% tip in her head. The mother with the twins who would need extra napkins and grace. And then, at 7:03, because it was always 7:03 on a Thursday, with the precision of someone who ran every part of his life to exact specification, the bell above the door rang. The temperature changed. It was the only way Deja had ever been able to describe it to Janelle. who had asked approximately 17 times why the whole diner seemed to shift slightly when he walked in. The temperature just changed. Like the air understood something before anyone's brain caught up. 12 men in dark suits filed in first. Not loudly. They were never loud. That was the thing. They were always absolutely silent, and arranged themselves along the walls with the practiced ease of people who did this professionally. Customers who had been settling into their breakfasts made small, unconscious adjustments, shifting slightly in their seats, suddenly very interested in their coffee cups. Nobody looked directly at the door. Deja looked directly at the door. Kim Jae-won walked to table 4. He was tall. That was the first thing. Always. Because it was unavoidable. And he moved with the specific, unhurried certainty of someone who had never once in his life had to hurry for anything. Dark charcoal suit. Perfectly fitted, not a crease out of place. Sharp jaw. Eyes that moved across a room the way a camera lens moves, taking everything in, missing nothing, giving nothing back. That he sat down. Folded his hands on the table. Looked at nothing in particular. Deja picked up her order pad, crossed the floor, and did not let herself hesitate at the edge of his section, because hesitating would mean acknowledging that something about the crossing of that particular distance required more than the professional ease she was paid to project. The usual? She asked. He looked up. Those eyes found her face with the particular directness of someone who did not practice looking away. The usual, he said. She wrote it down. She had never once, in 17 Thursdays, needed to write it down. She told herself it was because she was being thorough. She told herself this while writing down an order she had memorized after the first visit and could have recited in her sleep. Black coffee, short stack, no butter on the side, eggs scrambled but firm, wheat toast. She wrote every word of it like she was seeing it for the first time. She walked back to the counter, clipped the order up for Marcus, refilled Mrs. Washington's coffee before the third look. He's back, Janelle said at her elbow. Voice dropped to the register she used for information she considered significant. I see that. He was here last Thursday too. He's here every Thursday, Janelle. And the Thursday before that. Yes, that's what every Thursday means. Janelle leaned slightly against the counter, studying table 4 with the unsubtle interest of someone who had not yet learned the art of looking without looking. He's really, don't, Deja said. I was going to say well-dressed. You were not going to say well-dressed. Janelle had the dignity to look slightly caught. He tips good though. He tips 40%. Every time. Every time. Exact amount. No change. Deja picked up the coffee pot. Don't stare at his table. I'm not staring, I'm observing. There's it, Janelle. Janelle stopped observing. Deja crossed back to table 4 with the coffee pot held steady in a hand that was absolutely, completely, professionally steady, and refilled his cup without being asked because it needed refilling, and that was her job, and that was the only reason. He didn't look up when she poured. He was looking at the window, at the street outside, at something she couldn't see. In profile, his face was even harder to read than straight on. All clean lines and controlled stillness. The face of a man who had decided a long time ago what he was going to show the world and had not deviated from that decision since. She noticed the moment he exhaled. It was quiet, barely audible above the diner noise, but she was close enough to hear it, and it was the particular exhale of someone who had been holding their breath. Not from tension, from the absence of tension. Like sitting down at this table, in this noise, with butter and coffee in the air, was the first moment all week he had put something down. She filed that away in the drawer in her mind labeled not examining this, and walked back to her other tables. 2 miles across the city, in an office on the 14th floor of a building that did not advertise its occupants. Park Sung was having the kind of morning that had become standard since the Thursdays started. He stood in front of Kim's desk with a tablet in his hand and the expression of a man who had long since made peace with the particular texture of his professional life, which was to say, highly competent, occasionally baffling, never dull. The Macau contact confirmed the timeline, he said. The shipment clears customs Wednesday night, which gives us a 12-hour window before. Move it. Sung paused. Move it. Thursday morning. Move the window to Thursday afternoon. Sung looked at his tablet. He looked at the calendar. He looked at Kim, who was reviewing a document, and had the expression of a man who considered this conversation complete. Boss, Sung said carefully. This is the 3rd time this month we've pushed the Thursday window. I'm aware. The contact in Macau is starting to ask questions. Tell him the timeline shifted. He's going to want a reason. Tell him I said the timeline shifted. Kim turned a page. That's a reason. Sung wrote it down. He was very good at his job, which meant he was very good at doing what was needed and saying nothing about what he was thinking. And what he was thinking right now, he had already entered into the betting pool under the category of week 30. Kim actually speaks first. The pot was currently at an amount that would make a reasonable person uncomfortable. The Voss collection, Sung continued. 8 months outstanding. For $0.2 million. Do you want me to schedule a conversation? Not yet. He's starting to move assets. If we wait much longer. Not yet, Sung. Sung made a note. He had made this note before. He suspected he would make it again. What he did not say, what he had learned not to say, was that Kim Jae-won had once personally resolved a collection dispute in 40 minutes that Sung's entire team had been unable to close in 6 weeks. And the reason the Voss situation remained open after 8 months was not strategic patience that it was Thursday mornings. Sung was not paid to say that out loud. He was paid to run the operation efficiently, maintain the infrastructure, and quietly extend the betting pool deadline when circumstances required. He extended it on his way out of the office. That same night, in an apartment on the 4th floor of a building that was decent but not good, Deja Collins sat on her couch with a bowl of cereal. The expensive kind. The small Tuesday luxury she allowed herself because some things mattered, and the notebook open across her knees. The notebook was embarrassing. That was the honest word for it. 14 revisions of a business plan for a restaurant she had never opened and never shown anyone, written in handwriting that got smaller toward the back, where she'd run out of pages and started conserving space. Floor plans, menu drafts, cost breakdowns, supplier research, a whole section on atmosphere, lighting, music, the specific quality of warmth she wanted a person to feel when they walked through the door. She updated it the way some people updated journals. Not every day, but regularly, honestly. In the private language of a dream, she kept alive by writing it down and kept safe by showing it to no one. She added a new section tonight. Breakfast menu. She was detailed about the pancakes specifically, the exact texture she was after, the way the batter should sit, the temperature of the griddle, the specific weight of a stack that was generous without being excessive. She told herself she was being thorough. She told herself this with the same energy she'd used earlier to write down an order she already knew. Her phone rang. Simone. Hey, Deja said. So tell me more about this guy, Simone said, with the directness of someone who had known Deja for 12 years and had lost patience for preamble. What guy? The one you described to me for 45 minutes last week. I was describing a customer. Deja, a regular, at the diner. It was professional context. You told me the exact shade of his suit. I have an eye for detail. You told me he exhales when he sits down. Deja paused. That was an observation about customer comfort levels. Baby, Simone said, with the particular gentleness she deployed when she was about to say something true. You can talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. He's a customer. He comes in on Thursdays. He tips well and doesn't make conversation, and that's the entire story. And yet here we are. Here we are because you called me. I called because you mentioned him 3 times in a conversation that was supposed to be about my promotion. Deja closed the notebook. Opened it again. I'm just saying he's unusual. As a customer. Observationally. Don't me. I'm not mming you. I'm listening. You're mming me in silence, which is worse. Deja looked at the notebook page. The pancake section. The specific, detailed, embarrassingly thorough pancake section. He's nobody. He's table 4. That's it. Okay, Simone said, in the tone of someone who had decided to let a person arrive at their own conclusions at their own pace. Good night, Simone. Good night, Deja. She hung up. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at the notebook. She added one more note to the breakfast section. The specific warmth of the room she wanted around the table, the feeling she was going for, the quality of peace she had in mind. She told herself she was just being thorough. She was absolutely not being thorough. She closed the notebook, put it in the drawer, turned off the light, and lay in the dark being completely fine about everything for a very long time. The Thursdays accumulated the way most significant things accumulate, not in dramatic moments, but in small ones, one after another, each ordinary on its own and collectively impossible to ignore. On the second Thursday, the good coffee machine finally gave up entirely during the morning rush, not with a dramatic breakdown, but with a quiet, definitive silence that Marcus announced from the kitchen with a single word Deja chose not to repeat in mixed company. She went to table 4 with the other coffee, the one from the backup machine, the one that was adequate but not right, and set it down and said, without making it a bigger moment than it needed to be, "Machine's down. This is the backup. It's decent." Kim looked at the cup. "The usual anyway," he said. Something about the way he said it, without complaint, without the slight flicker of inconvenience she saw across most customers' faces when their expectations shifted, made her look at him for half a second longer than she intended to. "I'll let you know if the regular comes back online," she said. "It won't," he said. She almost asked how he knew. She didn't ask. She walked back to the counter and told Marcus she needed the backup running clean because table 4 said the good machine was done for the day, and Marcus fixed it by 11, and Deja never found out whether Kim's certainty had been a guess or something else entirely. She filed that in the drawer. The drawer was getting full. The third Thursday she arrived to find table 4 occupied. A young couple, early 20s, sharing a plate of pancakes with a specific unself-consciousness of people who had not yet learned that the world was watching. She had seated them herself, without thinking, the way she seated people in available spaces without consulting a chart, because she had the floor mapped in her head at all times. At 7:03 the bell rang. She was across the floor when it happened and she saw it from a distance. The way Kim walked in, read the room in the time it took most people to take off their coat, and found table 4 occupied. He stood for a moment that lasted no longer than 2 seconds and revealed nothing. Then he sat down in someone else's section. Table 7, which was technically in Janelle's rotation. The security detail redistributed themselves along the walls without comment. Janelle, to her credit, recovered faster than most people would have and went over within 2 minutes with a menu. Kim did not look at the menu. "Coffee," he said. "Black." He sat there for 40 minutes. His own section, Deja's section, was 3 tables away. She crossed it multiple times during those 40 minutes, refilling and checking and running food. And each time she was aware of him the way you're aware of weather, peripherally and constantly, without making it the subject of your direct attention. She did not go over. It wasn't her table. At 42 minutes the couple at table 4 finished, left a cash tip, put on their coats, and left. Deja cleared the table in 90 seconds. Reset it. Walked to table 7. "Your table's free," she said. Kim looked up. For just a moment, just the edge of a moment, something moved in his expression that she couldn't name. "Thank you," he said. He moved to table 4. Sat down. Folded his hands. She brought his coffee without being asked. He didn't comment on the 40 minutes. She didn't comment on the 40 minutes. The security detail, outside on the street, spent the commute back to the office in a silence that Sung later described as the silence of men who had witnessed something they did not have language for. The betting pool expanded its criteria. The 8th Thursday was the eye contact Thursday, which was how Deja privately categorized it in the part of her mind she was pretending didn't exist. She came to the table in the middle of a busy morning, 3 other tables running simultaneously, a mind full of orders and timing, and the specific background calculation that running a floor required, and she looked at him and said without particular ceremony, "You look tired." She said it the way she'd say it to Mr. Patterson or Mrs. Chun or any regular whose face she'd learned well enough to read, not as intimacy, just as observation, the honest currency of a relationship built across a counter. He looked up, full eye contact. For the first time in 8 Thursdays, he looked at her the way she looked at him, directly, completely, without the careful management of angle and distance they had both been maintaining. "Yes," he said, one word, completely unguarded. The most honest single syllable she had heard in a long time from a person who looked like they had never been unguarded in their life. She walked away before either of them could make it into something. She thought about it for the rest of the shift. She thought about it on the walk home. She stood in her kitchen eating leftover rice and thought about one unguarded syllable from a man she didn't know, and then she opened the notebook and wrote 3 pages of things she told herself were unrelated. The 14th Thursday, she brought his coffee without him ordering it. She was in the middle of a sentence with Mr. Patterson about his daughter's new job, and she detoured to table 4 on her way back to the counter and set the cup down and kept walking, didn't stop, didn't make it a moment, because it wasn't a moment. She had been refilling that cup every Thursday for 14 weeks, and her body simply knew when it was time. He didn't say anything when she set it down. He didn't look up, but his hand moved to the cup immediately, the way it did when she brought it at the expected time, and she caught that in her peripheral vision, and she told herself she hadn't caught it, and she was extremely convincing to everyone except herself. The 17th Thursday was the one that filled the drawer past capacity and broke the hinges. A man at the next table, middle 40s, suit that cost money but not enough money. The particular energy of someone who expected service to come with gratitude, snapped at her when she didn't refill his coffee the moment he looked at his cup. Not rudely by the legal definition. Just the special subtle rudeness of someone who had decided that the woman holding the coffee pot owed him something beyond the coffee. "When you get a moment," he said, with the inflection that meant the opposite. "Of course," Deja said, with the inflection that meant nothing at all, and refilled his cup and smiled the professional smile and moved on. She didn't look at table 4. She was very deliberate about not looking at table 4. The man at the next table left 11 minutes later. He hadn't finished his food. He didn't leave a tip. He didn't come back the following Thursday or any Thursday after that. And Deja, who noticed most things, noticed this and chose not to investigate the mechanism. What she noticed more was that 3 of Kim's security detail, the ones she'd started to recognize by position, the tall one near the window, the 2 near the door, had been less relaxed than usual for about 20 minutes after the interaction. Not visibly, just in the way you learn to read people when you read them professionally for a living. She put it in the drawer. The drawer had no more room. She bought a second drawer. 2 miles away, Park Sung was conducting what had become a weekly ritual he thought of privately as the Thursday debrief, which was not an official meeting and had no agenda and consisted primarily of him standing in the doorway of Kim's office, while Kim reviewed documents and Sung said the things that needed saying in the exact order they needed saying without saying the thing that was actually true. "The Macau contact wants confirmation by end of week," he said. "Confirmed. The situation with the Busan office. Handle it. The quarterly numbers. Leave them on the desk." Sung paused. This was the pause he used when he was transitioning to the real part. "The Voss collection." Kim didn't look up. "He's transferred 2 properties out of the primary holding company," Sung said. "If he moves the Meridian account before we engage, the recovery gets complicated." Kim turned a page. "Boss, I heard you. He's going to keep moving assets until there's nothing clean left to collect against. I know what he's doing." "Then?" "Not yet." Sung looked at him for a moment. He had worked for Kim Jae-won for 11 years. He had seen him make decisions that other people would have taken weeks to arrive at in the time it took to exhale. He had seen him see around corners that nobody else knew existed. He was not a man who waited on collections. He was not a man who let leverage erode through patience. He was also a man who checked his watch on Wednesday night, and the specific expression on his face when he did it was not the expression of a man thinking about a shipment. "The betting pool," Sung said carefully, "has been extended to week 50. That's not my concern. June has week 48. He's been insufferable. Then June can be insufferable. I have week 49. A pause. I'd like to be insufferable too, eventually." Kim looked up. He looked at Sung the way he looked at people who had said something that was technically within the limits of acceptable conversation, but had arrived at the edge of those limits with deliberate precision. Sung held the look. "Good night, Sung," Kim said. "Good night, boss." Sung walked out. He updated the pool on his phone in the elevator. He moved his own bet to week 47. He had a feeling. Kim sat alone in the office after Sung left, the way he sat alone in all the spaces he occupied, completely, without restlessness, the stillness of someone who had learned as a child that making yourself small and quiet was the best way to survive rooms that felt dangerous. Most rooms felt dangerous. That was the baseline. It had been the baseline since he was 7 years old in Busan, in a house where the heat was unreliable and the table was empty more often than it was full, and his mother's hands were always moving, working, always working, with the specific urgency of a woman who understood that stopping meant falling behind, and falling behind meant the kind of consequences that didn't forgive you. He had learned everything from watching her hands. He had learned to move through the world the same way, always working, always calculating, never stopping long enough for the empty table to catch up with him. He had built an empire out of that lesson. 12 years of it, starting at nothing, arriving at something that would have been unimaginable to the 7-year-old boy who ate rice on Saturdays because Saturday was the day his mother could afford the good pot. The diner smelled like that kitchen. That was the thing he had never said out loud. That was the thing he would rather pull the Macau deal entirely than admit to Park Sung or anyone else in his orbit. The butter, the coffee, the particular warmth of a room that ran on early mornings and fed people before the world got to them. It smelled exactly like the 1 hour of the week when he had been allowed to just be a child at a table. He had not felt like a child at a table in 31 years. He felt like it every Thursday morning at 7:03. He picked up his phone. He looked at the Voss file on his screen. He looked at the address he had already memorized. He thought about making the call and thought about not making the call and put the phone face down on the desk and went back to his documents and did not make the call. Not yet. Not yet meant something he was not ready to name. Outside his office, the city moved through the night the way it always did, loud and indifferent, and entirely unaware that the most controlled man in it was sitting in a temperature-exact room thinking about pancakes and a woman in a yellow apron who had looked at him on a Thursday 8 weeks ago and said you looked tired, like it was the most natural thing in the world to say to a person. Like he was just a person. Like that was all he was. He sat with that for a long time. Then he straightened his desk, everything in its exact position, every edge aligned, the specific order that meant the room was right, and he turned off the light and went home. He checked the Thursday schedule on his way out. Clear. Good. The eviction notice was taped to the front door at eye level, which meant whoever put it there wanted it to be seen immediately by the first person to arrive. That person was Deja, at 6:45 on a Tuesday, 2 days before Thanksgiving, a coffee in one hand and her keys in the other, and she stood on the sidewalk in the early cold and read it once before she went inside. Miss Carroll was at table 4 with a coffee she hadn't touched. That was the first sign of how bad it was. Miss Carroll always drank her coffee. Deja had never once seen her let it go cold. "How long have you known?" Deja asked, sitting down across from her. Miss Carroll wrapped both hands around the cup. "A few months." "How far behind?" A pause. "Far enough." "Miss Carroll, I kept thinking I could catch up." Her voice was steady in the way voices are steady when the person has already done their crying and arrived on the other side. "The summer was slow. Then the fall. I kept thinking the next month would be better." Deja read the notice again. Raymond Voss. 30 days. The building had been sold to a development company 3 months ago without any of them knowing, and the debt was called, and the math did not work, and there were 30 days left. Janelle arrived at 7 and cried with the immediate openness of someone who processed feelings in real time. Marcus put his head in his hands when he read the notice and kept it there for 2 full minutes in a silence that said everything he wasn't going to say out loud. The morning regulars arrived in 1s and 2s, felt the changed energy, and most of them left quietly, taking their usual orders to go. Deja read the notice a 3rd time. She put it down. She tied her apron. "I'll handle it," she said. Miss Carroll looked up from her cold coffee. "Baby, I'll handle it." She said it without drama, without volume, with the flat certainty of someone stating a fact. "I'm going to look into this, Voss. I'm going to find out what the options are. 30 days is 30 days, not nothing. Deja, there's no money to fight this. The legal fees alone. I said I'll handle it." She had $2,300 in savings, a legal knowledge that extended no further than what she'd absorbed from watching court shows during slow afternoons, and absolutely no plan. She also said it out loud in front of witnesses, which meant the only direction available to her was forward. She picked up her order pad. She went to table 3, where Mrs. Chun had been waiting with patient dignity for 7 minutes, and she took the order and called it back to Marcus and spent the rest of her shift running her floor with the same efficiency she always ran it. Because falling apart on a Tuesday morning was a luxury she was not in a position to afford. That evening she opened her laptop. She started with Raymond Voss. He was not difficult to find. Men like Voss left extensive paper trails because extensive paper trails were how you demonstrated the kind of success that required other people to know about it. Development company, founded 11 years ago, portfolio of commercial and residential properties across the north side of the city. 3 luxury condo conversions in the last 2 years, all in neighborhoods that had been something else before he arrived. She dug further. Business filings. Property transfers. The names of holding companies nested inside other holding companies like Russian dolls made of money. She was methodical about it in a way that surprised her. She had not known this particular competence was in her until she needed it, and now she pulled threads with the same calm focus she used to run a double shift, following one name to the next, one address to the next, building a picture. The picture was not clean. Voss had connections she didn't like. Not illegal, not explicitly, but the kind of connections that existed in the specific gray geography between legitimate business and things that didn't get discussed in public. Shell companies. Money that moved in ways that didn't add up if you were looking for it to add up. Names that appeared in news articles about investigations that had been opened and then quietly closed. She told herself this was useful context. She kept digging. And then, almost by accident, she was cross-referencing an address from a business filing, and her eye caught a detail in an unrelated article. She found herself in territory that made her close the laptop. She sat in the closed laptop silence for a moment. She opened it again. She wasn't looking for this. She was looking for leverage against Voss. She was not looking for whatever this thread was pulling toward. She was especially not looking for the particular shape of this thread, which had a texture she recognized from the 17 Thursdays of not examining, from the drawer that was full, from the specific way the other customers at table 4 had always given that table a wider berth than the room required. She closed the laptop. She made cereal. She turned on the television, something loud and undemanding, a competition show where people were extremely invested in outcomes that did not matter. She watched it without seeing it. She was not thinking about this. She was absolutely thinking about this. The next Thursday, he came in at 7:03 and she brought his coffee, and everything was exactly as normal except that it wasn't. Her hands, her steady, professional, never-wavering hands that had carried full trays through a brunch rush with a broken coffee machine, were not quite steady when she set down the cup. She felt him notice. Usual? She asked. Yes. She wrote it down. She turned to leave. Is everything all right? His voice was quiet the way it was always quiet. Not soft. Not gentle exactly. Just low and careful. The voice of someone who had learned that volume was wasteful. She turned back. He was looking at her with those eyes. The ones she had been not examining for 17 weeks. And in that moment, with the noise of the diner all around them and Janelle moving 3 tables over and Marcus calling a time from the back, she had the absolute certain understanding that he already knew about the notice. She didn't know how she knew he knew. She just knew. The same way she knew things about people. Not from anything they said, but from the quality of their stillness, the exact angle of their attention, the small grammar of a face that was trying not to say something. He knew. He had known for days. And he hadn't said anything. The thing that lived in the full drawer pushed very hard against the hinges. I'm fine, she said. He held her gaze for exactly 1 second past the point where it would have been ordinary. Okay, he said. She walked away. She didn't look back. He watched her go. He picked up his coffee. He did not take out his phone and make the call that would resolve the entire situation in under an hour. He did not do this because making the call required admitting something to himself in the language his world understood, and the thing he would be admitting was this: that a woman in a yellow apron had, over the course of 17 ordinary Thursday mornings, become the fixed point around which everything else in his life was quietly reorganizing. He was not ready to say that out loud. He drank his coffee. It was exactly right. It was always exactly right when she made it. He put the cup down and looked out the window at the street and sat with the specific loneliness of a man who had everything and had not, until recently, understood what that meant. 3 days after that Thursday, Deja put on her good blazer. She printed her folder, 12 pages, organized by category, every public record she'd found cross-referenced and annotated, and she rehearsed her speech in the bathroom mirror until she could deliver it without her voice doing the thing it did when she was trying very hard not to show fear. She told no one. Of course she told no one. Simone would have told her not to go alone. Miss Carroll would have worried. Janelle would have wanted to come, which would have been sweet and completely impractical. She told no one and drove across the city to the glass building where Raymond Voss's development company occupied the 7th floor, and she walked in and told the receptionist she had a meeting with Mr. Voss regarding the Carroll's diner property. And she said it with the confidence of someone who absolutely had a meeting, even though she absolutely did not have a meeting, and the receptionist, flustered, young, made uncertain by Deja's specific quality of certainty, called upstairs, and 5 minutes later Deja was in an elevator going to the 7th floor. Raymond Voss was what she'd expected and worse. 50s, silver-haired, the practiced ease of a man who had been in enough rooms to know how to fill them. He looked at her across his desk with the expression of a man doing a quick calculation and arriving at a number that was lower than she intended. She put her folder on his desk. She started her speech. He let her finish. She gave him that. He let her finish without interrupting, which she later understood was not courtesy but strategy, the patience of a man who wanted to know exactly how much she knew before deciding how to respond. The sale is final, he said when she was done. Your employer understood what she was signing. My employer is 61 years old and has run that business for 30 years. She deserves what she deserves, Voss said, with the particular smoothness of someone who had practiced being unkind in polished ways, is a conversation with a financial advisor, which she should have had before she fell this far behind. He slid her folder back across the desk. I appreciate you coming in, but this isn't something I'm able to help you with. You could extend the timeline, Deja said. Her voice was completely level. 60 days instead of 30. Miss Carroll could. The timeline is set. Or a payment arrangement. If the outstanding amount is. Miss Collins. He said her name like he'd done her a favor by remembering it. I want to be direct with you. This property is part of a larger development project. The timeline isn't negotiable. The sale isn't reversible. And I'd encourage you to be careful about the questions you're asking into arrangements that don't concern you. He paused. For your own sake. The room was quiet. Deja looked at him. She looked at him the way she looked at people she had fully read, completely, finally, without the filter of professional courtesy. And what she saw was a man who was accustomed to making threats that were not technically threats, and having people understand what they meant. She understood what it meant. She stood up. She picked up her folder. Thank you for your time, she said, in a voice that could strip the finish off his desk. She walked out. She pressed the elevator button. She rode down to the lobby. She walked to her car with the steady pace of someone who had not just been threatened in a 7th-floor office by a man in an expensive suit. She got in. She closed the door. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear. She wanted to be clear about that, at least to herself. Not from fear, not from the threat, not from the cold reality of a situation that was worse than she'd understood when she drove over here. From fury. Clean, specific, justified fury at a man who had looked at her folder and smiled, and said the sale was final, and told her to be careful like she was a problem he was solving instead of a person with a point. She pulled out her phone. She looked at it for a long moment. She put it back in her bag. She handled her own problems. She had always handled her own problems. She was not going to call someone and explain that she'd driven across the city alone to confront a property developer and had accomplished nothing and could use some help, because saying that out loud would require admitting that she needed something she didn't know how to ask for. She started the car. She drove back toward the diner, because there was still an afternoon shift and Miss Carroll needed her, and Deja Collins, no matter what else was happening, always showed up for her shift. She did not notice the black car that had been parked half a block from the building's entrance when she arrived, and was still there when she left. She did not notice it pull away from the curb 2 minutes after she did. She was too busy being fine. Voss made the call at 4:17 in the afternoon. He made it from his personal phone, the one he kept separate from the business lines, the one whose number he gave to the specific category of people who operated in the specific geography between legitimate and otherwise. He was not a man who panicked easily, but the woman with the folder had unnerved him in a way he was not inclined to examine, not because of what she knew, which was less than he'd feared, but because of the way she'd looked at him when she stood up to leave, like she was memorizing something she intended to use later. He called a man named Choi, who owed him a favor from 3 years ago, and he told Choi that he needed a quiet conversation facilitated with someone in Kim Jae-won's network, nothing formal, just a courtesy communication, just making sure certain interests were aligned. Choi said he'd make a call. Choi made a call. That call went to a man named Beck, who was not technically in Kim's network, but knew someone who was, and Beck's call went up the chain with the particular speed of information that has a name attached to it that makes people move quickly. Park Sung received the information at 4:49. He sat with it for 30 seconds, an eternity by his standards, and then he walked into Kim's office and said, with the expression of a man who had learned to deliver difficult information efficiently and without editorializing, Voss made a contact. He's trying to establish whether we have an interest in a property on East Carroll Street. Kim looked up from his desk. The expression on his face was not the expression Sung had expected. He had expected calculation, the slight focusing of attention that meant Kim was assessing a situation from multiple angles simultaneously. He had seen that expression through every crisis, every negotiation, every situation Sung could remember in 11 years. This was not that expression. This was something else. Something that moved through Kim's face and was gone before Sung could name it, replaced immediately by the stillness he showed the world. When Kim said, "This afternoon," she went to his office. A pause. Alone. Yes. The silence that followed was the kind of silence Sung had learned to read the way other people read weather. This particular silence had a specific texture. It was the silence of a decision that had already been made, that had perhaps been approaching for weeks, that was simply now undeniable. Kim stood up. Get the car, he said. Sung was already reaching for his phone. Deja was still sitting in her car outside Voss's building when the three black vehicles turned the corner onto the street. She had been sitting there for 20 minutes, which she told herself was because she was waiting for traffic to clear, which was not true because traffic had been fine for the last 18 minutes. She was sitting there because her hands were still carrying the anger from the meeting, and she didn't trust herself to drive through it yet, which was a level of self-awareness she was not inclined to give herself credit for. She saw the vehicles from her side mirror. She watched them park, efficiently, taking up exactly the right amount of space, and she watched the doors open. The men who got out moved with a specific kind of purpose, the kind that came from being very certain about where you were going and what you were going to do when you got there. The last door of the last car opened. She knew the walk before she saw the face. Of course she did. She had watched that walk cross her diner floor 17 times. She knew the angle of it, the unhurried certainty of it, the particular way he moved that was neither fast nor slow but simply inevitable, like whether moving in a direction it had already decided on. Kim Jae-won walked into Voss's building. Deja sat in her car. She sat in her car, and she watched the building, and she thought about 17 Thursdays and a drawer that was broken and a folder on a desk and a threat that was not technically a threat, and she thought about the way she had looked at him 8 weeks ago and said you looked tired and meant it as nothing except what it was, and the way he had said yes like he'd been waiting for someone to notice. She thought about all of that, and she did not leave. She waited. 22 minutes later, the front doors opened. Kim walked out first, the way people walked out of situations they had concluded, with the particular quality of someone who had resolved a thing and was now on the other side of it. His suit was exactly as it had been when he went in. His face was exactly as it always was, controlled, unreadable, giving nothing away to the street. He saw her car immediately. She saw him see it. He stopped. They looked at each other through her windshield across 40 feet of parking lot, and the entire weight of 17 weeks of not examining landed between them, with the specific finality of something that had been waiting for its moment. Deja got out of the car. She crossed the distance between them, and she stopped 6 feet away, and she looked at him, and he looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a long moment. You knew, she said. Yes. How long? It wasn't a question. The flatness of it carried the whole thing. The 17 Thursdays, the drawer, the cash payments, the men near the exits. Long enough, he said. And then, because he had decided somewhere in the last 22 minutes that there was no version of this where honesty was not the only option available to him. About the diner. A few weeks. About the rest, longer. The rest, she repeated. What you were starting to figure out. The afternoon was cold. Traffic moved on the street behind him. Somewhere up on the 7th floor, in a glass office, a man in an expensive suit was presumably doing whatever men like that did after situations like the one that had just concluded. She's not going to lose the diner, Kim said. Because you. Yes. Without asking. I didn't think you'd. I had a plan, Deja said. Her voice was quiet. Completely quiet. The quieter she got, the more the situation should worry. Her mother's voice in her head. I had a plan, and I was working it, and you, she stopped. Breathe once. You don't get to decide that your way is better without asking. He held her gaze. You're right, he said. The flatness of it. No defense, no explanation, no redirection, was the thing she hadn't prepared for. She had prepared for justification. She had a response to justification. She did not have a response to a man in a charcoal suit looking at her with eyes that missed nothing and saying you're right like it cost him something to say it, and he was paying it anyway. About all of it, he said. You're right. Park Sung, positioned 30 feet away with the practiced invisibility of a man who had spent 11 years being present without being in the way, quietly took out his phone and moved his bet from week 49 to week 47. The drive back to her apartment was quiet. The evening was quiet. Simone called and Deja let it ring and then called back 10 minutes later. Something happened, Simone said, instead of hello. I went to see Voss today. Deja. I had a plan. You went alone. I always go alone. What happened? She told her. All of it. The meeting, the threat, the parking lot, the 3 black cars, the 22 minutes, the conversation. Simone listened without interrupting, which was unusual, and when Deja finished there was a silence that had the texture of careful thinking. He fixed it, Simone said finally. Without asking. Without asking, Simone agreed. And you're angry? Of course I'm angry. I was handling it. Were you? Simone. I'm asking. Actually asking. Because you've been telling me you were handling it for 3 weeks and your plan was a folder and $2,000, and the specific energy you get when you've decided something is your problem, even when it maybe isn't only your problem. Deja was quiet. He fixed it, Simone said again, more gently. For Miss Carroll. For the diner. And maybe, a pause. Maybe for something else too. Don't. I'm just. He lied by omission for 4 months. He didn't lie. He just didn't tell you what he was. That's the same thing. Is it? Simone said. Or is it a man who found somewhere that felt like the world wasn't after him and was afraid that if you knew what he was, it would go away? The apartment was quiet. The cereal box was on the counter. She hadn't eaten dinner. He has people, Simone, she said. Like. I know. That's not nothing. No, it's not nothing. A pause. But you've been looking at his table every time the door opened on days he doesn't come in. I know because you told me about it without realizing you were telling me about it. Gentle, completely certain. That's not nothing either. Deja didn't answer. She sat with it after she hung up, in the quiet of her apartment, with the cereal box and the notebook in the drawer and the business card that wasn't there yet, but felt like it was already coming. And she thought about a man who had waited 40 minutes at the wrong table without complaint, who had said yes to you look tired like it was a gift, who had made one call about a debt that had been sitting for 8 months, and aimed it at a building where a woman who didn't know his last name had gone alone with a folder and no backup. She thought about the fury, which was real and valid, and she was keeping it. She thought about the thing underneath the fury, which was also real, and which she was not ready to name yet, but which had been building in the drawer since the second Thursday, when she noticed him exhale. She went to bed. She did not sleep well. She was fine. She didn't go to work for 3 days. She called Miss Carroll on Tuesday morning with the specific voice she used when she needed someone to believe something that wasn't entirely true, and she said she had a cold coming on and didn't want to bring it into the diner, and Miss Carroll said, "Baby, take your time," and Deja hung up and lay on her couch and stared at the ceiling with the particular stillness of someone whose mind was doing very loud things. The cereal situation deteriorated. She had meant to buy milk and had not bought milk, and by Wednesday morning she was eating it dry from the bowl with the methodical joylessness of someone who had made worse decisions than this and survived them. Simone arrived on Wednesday afternoon without being asked. She knocked once, and when Deja opened the door, she looked at Deja and Deja looked at her, and Simone walked in and put a bag of groceries on the counter without saying anything about it. "I brought milk," Simone said. "I don't need milk." "I brought it anyway." She put the kettle on. She moved around the kitchen with the ease of someone who knew where everything was, which she did, because she had been in this kitchen enough times to have an opinion about where things should live. "How are you actually doing?" "I'm fine." "Okay." Simone leaned against the counter and looked at her with the particular patience of someone who had been Deja's best friend for 12 years and understood that fine was the first word in a longer sentence that would arrive eventually. "We can just sit here until you're ready." They sat. Deja ate her cereal dry because she was going to finish it before she put the milk in, as a matter of principle. "He has people, Simone," she said finally. "Like, actual people. Whose job it is. To be. People. I know. That's not the life I'm trying to have. I know that too. I'm trying to open a restaurant. I'm trying to do something real, something that's mine, I don't have space for." She gestured with the spoon, a vague motion that encompassed everything she didn't want to name. "This. What is this? You know what this is. I want to hear you say it." Deja put the spoon down. "A man I don't know? Who does things I can't ask about? Who came into my life through my section and my table and my—" She stopped. "My routine. My Thursday morning routine. And now I can't." She stopped again. "Can't what?" Simone said quietly. The apartment was quiet. Traffic outside. The kettle starting to build. "I looked at the door every time it opened on Friday," Deja said. "My whole shift. Every single time." She looked at her hands. "He doesn't come on Fridays. I know he doesn't come on Fridays." And I still looked. Simone nodded. Said nothing. "I've been updating the notebook," Deja said. "The breakfast section specifically. I've been." She laughed, a short, slightly pained sound. "I added a whole section on pancakes. I told myself it was recipe development." "Was it?" A long pause. "No," Deja said. Simone poured the tea. She brought 2 cups to the couch and sat down and handed one over and waited, because this was the part of knowing Deja that required patience, the part just before she got to the real thing. "What do I actually want?" Deja said. The question Simone hadn't asked yet, the one she was asking herself. "I don't know. That's what I'm asking. I want. She wrapped both hands around the cup. I want someone who shows up. Quietly. Consistently. Without making me feel like a project or a situation that needs managing. She looked at the cup. I want someone who lets me be who I am and doesn't need me to be smaller or more manageable or easier. A pause. I want to not feel like I'm carrying everything alone all the time. Simone didn't say anything. And I want to open the restaurant. Deja continued. My restaurant. With my menu and my room and my specific quality of warm, and I want it to be mine, and I want to not be afraid of it anymore. The apartment was very quiet. Those are good things to want, Simone said. They're terrifying things to want. Also that. Deja drank her tea. Outside the window, the city moved through its afternoon without pausing for any of this, which was either comforting or cruel, depending on your relationship to scale. He scares me, she said. Not like that. Not the way you'd think. He scares me because I looked at him on day one and I read something and I put it in a drawer and locked it, and the drawer is broken now and I have to figure out what to do with what I found. What did you find? Simone said. A long pause. A person who feels safer in my section than anywhere else in his life, Deja said quietly. And I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what it means for me. I don't know if I'm equipped for whatever his actual life is. She looked at Simone. I don't know if I want to be. But I keep looking at the door on days he doesn't come. Simone put her cup down. She looked at Deja with the clear eyes of someone who loved her without needing her to be different than she was. Then go to work tomorrow, she said. Not for Miss Carroll. Not for the paycheck. Go for yourself and see what you find out. 2 miles away, Kim Jae-won was doing the Thursday thing. He had not considered not doing it. The thought had not occurred to him. Table 4 was where he went on Thursdays, and the fact that the situation had shifted, the fact that she knew things now that she hadn't known before, the fact that there was a conversation outstanding that he did not know how to have, none of that changed the pull of it. Thursday, 7:03. The usual. A different waitress came to his table. Young, nervous, doing her best. She had a good instinct for when to leave space, and she used it now, taking his order without unnecessary words and retreating quickly, and he appreciated that even as the table felt wrong in a way that was difficult to locate specifically. He ate. He tipped exactly 40%, because the amount had nothing to do with the waitress and everything to do with the table, and he had been tipping 40% at this table for 17 weeks regardless of circumstance. He left. In the car, Sung was unusually quiet. Say it, Kim said. Sung considered his words. The table looked right, he said carefully. Everything was in order. It wasn't right. No, Sung agreed. It wasn't. They drove in silence for a moment. She'll come back, Sung said. Not sycophantically. Sung had never been sycophantic, which was one of the reasons Kim had kept him for 11 years. Just factually, with the confidence of a man who had been watching this situation develop since week 1 and had placed his money accordingly. You don't know that. I know she went to Vasa's building alone with a folder and stayed in the parking lot for 20 minutes after you went in, Sung said. A woman who wanted nothing to do with this would have left. A pause. She stayed. She got out of the car. She said everything she needed to say, and she said you're right when you agreed with her. Another pause. That's not a woman who's done with something. That's a woman who's figuring out what she wants to do with it. Kim looked out the window at the city moving past. The notebook, he said. Sung waited. She has a business plan, Kim said. For a restaurant. She's been working on it for years. She hasn't shown it to anyone. How do you know that? A pause. I pay attention. Sung made a note that was not in any official document. And when she's ready to move on it, she's going to need someone who can facilitate the financial infrastructure without making her feel like a charity case. Kim turned from the window. Quietly. No conditions. No timeline. Sung looked at him. Boss. What? You are aware, Sung said, with great care, that this is the conversation a person has when they've decided something. I'm aware. I want to be clear that I have week 47 in the pool. I know you have week 47. I'm just making sure we're on the same page. Kim looked at him with the look that meant the conversation was over. Sung made another note. Deja went back on Friday. She told herself she was going for Miss Carroll. For the regulars. For the rhythm of a morning that needed to keep moving regardless of what was happening in her personal life, which was a categorization she was using loosely because she was not entirely sure this qualified as her personal life yet, which was itself a thought she was not examining. She tied her apron. She pinned her hair. She picked up her order pad. She was fine. She was completely fine. She looked at the door every time it opened for 4 hours. He didn't come on Fridays. She knew this. She had known this for 17 weeks of Thursdays that were specifically not Fridays. She was not looking for him. She was just maintaining general awareness of the entrance, which was good professional practice in a customer-facing environment. 11:47 a.m., the bell. Mr. Patterson, scarf and newspaper, making his way toward his usual booth. Deja smiled and went to seat him, and her chest did something she did not acknowledge. The specific, complicated feeling of a door that opened and was not the right door, and she brought Mr. Patterson his coffee and took his order and was completely fine about all of it. She went home at 4. She lay on the couch. She did not open the notebook. She opened the notebook. She read the pancake section she had written 3 weeks ago, and she sat with it for a long time. This record of a thing she had been building in private. And then she closed the notebook and put it back in the drawer and went to bed at 9 p.m. like a person who had processed their feelings and arrived at clarity. She had not arrived at clarity. She arrived at Thursday. Nobody expected Wednesday. Deja was running 3 tables short-staffed. Janelle had called in sick, which meant the section coverage was thin, and the morning rush was the kind of morning rush that required every part of her attention. And the coffee machine was making its sound again. And the kid at table 7 had committed orange juice to the floor with a commitment that suggested he had never once felt regret about anything. She was in the middle of a trajectory between table 3 and the coffee machine when the bell rang. The diner adjusted. The invisible temperature shift. The small unconscious movements of customers who did not know why they were making them. She looked up. He was not supposed to be here on Wednesdays. Kim walked in and read the room and found table 4 occupied. The young couple again. Same table. Different pancakes, and without breaking stride, he moved to table 7, the orange juice table, and sat down next to the kid, who looked up at him with the complete fearlessness of someone who had not yet learned to be afraid of things that were larger than him. "You're really tall," the kid said. Kim looked at him. "Yes." "Cool," the kid said, and returned his attention to what remained of the orange juice situation. Deja put the coffee pot down and picked it back up and crossed to table 7 and refilled the cup that wasn't there yet. She had to bring one first, from the counter, which she did, and she set it down and poured without looking at him because she was a professional and this was a professional interaction. Her hand was steady. "You're not supposed to be here on Wednesdays," she said. "No," he agreed. The diner noise moved around them. Someone called an order from the back. The coffee machine made its sound. She should leave. 3 other tables. The machine. The kid's orange juice situation required adult intervention at some point. She didn't leave. "The diner's still open," she said. Carefully neutral. "I know. Miss Carroll doesn't know why Voss dropped the claim. She thinks he just changed his mind. People change their minds." Deja looked at him then. Really looked at him. The way she had been not looking for 17 weeks, and he met it. All of it. The 17 weeks of it. The drawer and the fury and the Friday door watching. And he did not look away. "Did you do it for the diner?" she said. "Or did you do it for me?" The kid at table 7 produced a drawing from somewhere. Crayon on a paper napkin. A creature that was either a very large dog or a dinosaur. And held it up toward Kim with the gravity of someone presenting important work. Kim looked at the drawing. He looked at it like it deserved his complete attention, which it did, because the kid had put something real into it, and Kim J1, who missed nothing, knew what real effort looked like regardless of the scale. "Dinosaur," the kid said. "I made it." "I can see that," Kim said. He looked at it for another moment. "The feet are good." The kid looked at the feet. Considered this. Nodded with the satisfaction of an artist receiving informed feedback. Kim looked back at Deja. "Yes," he said. Not an answer. Entirely an answer. Both things at once. The diner and her. No separation between them. Because there wasn't one and there hadn't been one for a long time. The parking lot after her shift was exactly as unromantic as a parking lot was supposed to be. Cold concrete. The smell of exhaust from the street. The distant sound of a city that continued regardless of what was happening in its smaller moments. Deja came out the back at 3:14, still in her apron because she had forgotten to take it off, which she never did. Kim was leaning against a car that cost more than her annual salary with the particular stillness of a man who had decided to be somewhere and was simply being there, without agenda, without the managed calculation she associated with him in other contexts. He looked, she thought, like someone who was waiting to be told what happened next. She stopped a few feet away. They both looked at something that was not each other. "You should have told me," she said. "First thing. No preamble. No warm-up. straight to the center of it. Yes, he said. I looked stupid. You were never. I looked stupid to myself. Her voice was quiet. The quieter she got. I read people. That's what I do. I read people, and I didn't read you, and I put things in a drawer and locked it and told myself I was being professional. That bothered me more than the rest of it. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, it was with the specific care of someone who had decided, possibly recently, and with some cost to themselves, that honesty was the only currency that worked here. You did read me, he said. You just didn't want to know what you found. She opened her mouth, closed it. He continued, looking straight ahead at the street. You knew something was different. You knew for months. You looked at table for every time the door opened when I wasn't there. He paused. I watched you look. That is, I was not. Deja. She stopped. Her name. The first time. 2 syllables carrying the weight of 17 Thursdays, of 40 minutes at the wrong table, of coffee brought before it was ordered, of an exhale she had noticed on the second week and filed away and never stopped thinking about. It landed with the quiet force of something that had been waiting a long time to be said. Something shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way things shifted in stories where the moment was announced by weather or music or the alignment of circumstances. It shifted the way a room shifts when your eyes finally adjust to the dark and you realize you could see the whole time. I don't know what to do with you, she said. The most honest thing she had said in 4 months. Maybe longer. I know, he said. I don't know what to do with you either. She looked at him. That's supposed to be reassuring? It's supposed to be true. 30 feet away, Park Sung was looking at his phone with the studied concentration of a man who was absolutely not listening to anything happening 30 feet in front of him. You scared me, she said quietly. The words cost something. She paid them anyway. I know. I don't scare easy. I know that too. So you understand why I need you to, she stopped. Search for the word. There wasn't one word. Explain, he offered. Everything, she said. Not right now, not all at once, but eventually. Everything. Because I don't do half-truths and I don't do situations I don't understand and I don't do. She gestured at him, at the suit, at the men positioned at the perimeter of the parking lot in the specific way of people who were professionally vigilant. This, without knowing what this is. This, he said. This, she confirmed. He looked at her for a long moment. She let him look. She let him see all of it. The apron she'd forgotten to take off, the tiredness behind her eyes, the fury that had quieted but not disappeared, and underneath it all the things she had been protecting for 4 months that he had apparently been seeing since the beginning. Okay, he said. Okay. Everything. Eventually. He said it the way he agreed to terms. With the weight of someone who kept commitments because they did not make them lightly. I can do that. She searched his face. The instinct she had been overriding for 4 months, she let it run. She let it read him the way it read everyone. Fully, and without the filter of what she wanted to find. It didn't say danger. It said, this man has been sitting at your table every Thursday for a year waiting to be seen by someone who is not afraid of him. It said, he exhales when he sits down because your section is the only place in his life where nothing is required of him. It said, he waited 40 minutes at the wrong table not because he was strategic about it, but because leaving was not something he was willing to do. She looked away. Not retreat. Recalibration. Thursday, she said, readying her apron with the brisk efficiency of someone concluding a practical conversation. Your table's going to be free. Mr. and Mrs. Peterson switched to booths. A pause. I'll be there, Kim said. I know, Deja said. You always are. She walked back inside. He stood in the parking lot and watched the door close behind her, and he stood there for a moment in the cold afternoon with something moving through his chest that he did not have a word for, had never had a word for, had spent 31 years outrunning, and he let it move. Park Sung appeared at his elbow with the timing of someone who had been counting seconds. The betting pool, he said. Pay out whatever needs paying. There was a substantial contingent who bet on never, so technically. Sung. Week 47 wins. I want that acknowledged. Acknowledged. Sung smiled at his phone. It was a small smile, private, the smile of a man who worked for someone who was, in this particular moment, exactly as human as the rest of them. Good outcome, Sung said. Go get the car, Kim said. Sung went to get the car. Kim looked at the diner door one more time. Through the glass, he could see the familiar shape of the floor, the tables, the regulars, the counter where the coffee machine was probably still making its sound. He could see Janelle moving between tables with the energy of someone who had returned from sick leave and was overcorrecting. He could see Marcus's hands through the kitchen window, moving the way hands moved when they knew the work. He could see Deja's back, yellow apron, hair pinned up, order pad in hand, moving through her section with the ease of someone who had built their competence into their body over years, who carried the work without being weighed down by it. His table was empty, clean, waiting. Thursday, she had said. He got in the car. Thursday came the way all Thursdays came, announced by the particular shift in the week's rhythm that Kim had been tracking for months before he understood what he was tracking. He was at the diner at 7:03. The security detail took their positions. He walked to table 4, sat down, folded his hands. Deja arrived with the coffee pot in 30 seconds. She poured his cup. She looked at him. "You look tired," she said. Something moved across his face. The not smile, the one that lived just below the surface of the controlled expression he showed the world, the one that was better than a smile because it was real. "I haven't been sleeping," he said. "Drink more water." She held the pot. "The usual?" "Yes," he said. She wrote it down. She had never once needed to write it down. She wrote it down anyway, because some things deserved to be recorded, even if only on a diner order slip that would be thrown away at the end of the shift. She walked toward the kitchen. She stopped. She turned. "Kim," she said. He looked up immediately, like he had been waiting for his name in her mouth the same way she had been waiting to use it, with the specific readiness of someone who has been anticipating a thing and arrived at it finally, not with relief, but with something quieter and more permanent than relief. "For what it's worth," she said, "this is still my favorite table to work." She disappeared into the kitchen. At table 4, Kim J1 picked up his coffee. He took a sip, and he sat in the warm noise of the diner, butter and coffee, Marcus calling times, Janelle overcorrecting her way through the section, the regulars in their regular places, and he felt, for the first time in a very long time, completely at peace. 6 months passed the way things passed when you were paying attention to them, fully, with detail, with the texture of real time rather than the compressed memory of things you rushed through. She slid the notebook across table 4 on a Thursday morning when the diner was at its normal volume, neither looking at him when she put it down nor moving away quickly the way she would have before. She walked back to the counter. She refilled Mrs. Chen's tea. She took an order at table 3. She did not watch him read it. He read every page. Slowly. The floor plans, the menus, the supplier research, the section on atmosphere, the specific quality of warm she was going for. The pancake section, detailed and exact, and written in handwriting that got smaller toward the back, where she had run out of pages. 14 revisions of something she had been building in private for years. He read the whole thing the way it deserved to be read, with complete attention, the same attention he gave to everything that mattered. When she came back to refill his coffee, there was a business card on top of the closed notebook. "No name, just a number. Call it when you're ready," he said. "No conditions. No timeline." She looked at the card. She looked at him. She picked it up and put it in her apron pocket with the steady hands of someone who had made a decision, not in this moment, but in the accumulated weight of all the moments before it. "The usual?" she said. "Yes," he said. She wrote it down. 8 months after that, on a Friday evening in early spring, a new place opened on Clement Street. Not a diner. A restaurant. Warm light, good wood, tables that felt intimate without being small. A menu on a chalkboard behind the counter, written in handwriting that people would recognize as the handwriting of someone who meant everything they wrote. The kitchen ran clean from the first hour. This was not an accident. The kitchen ran clean because the person who had designed it had spent 4 years watching what worked and what didn't in someone else's kitchen, and 3 years before that in culinary school learning the fundamentals before the money ran out. And somewhere between those experiences and 14 revisions of a notebook, she had built a precise and specific understanding of what a kitchen needed to do and how it needed to feel. Miss Carroll was at the best table, the one by the window, crying happy tears into a glass of champagne that Deja had personally poured for her. Simone was at the bar telling anyone who would listen that she had always known, which was both true and slightly revisionist and entirely forgivable. The dining room was full, not chaotically, but comfortably, the specific fullness of a room that was the right size for the feeling it was built to hold. At the corner table, slightly apart from the others, positioned with good sight lines to the door, the kind of placement that occurred naturally to someone who had spent a long time knowing where the exits were, a man in a charcoal suit sat with his hands folded on the table and waited. He was not early. He was exactly on time. He was always exactly on time. Deja came out of the kitchen at 8:47, her chef's apron clean because the first service had gone exactly as planned. She moved through the dining room the way she moved through any room, like she had already accounted for every variable in it and arrived at ease. She saw him immediately, across the room, through the warm light and the quiet noise of a place that was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. She saw him. Something moved across her face that was not surprise and not relief, and was not any word she had used before for the feeling of arriving somewhere you built yourself. She walked over. She poured his coffee without being asked because she had brought the pot specifically, because she had known he would be at that table, because some things became true through repetition, and this was one of them. He looked up. "You should eat," she said. "The pancakes are good. I made them." "I know they are," he said. She stood there for a moment and she looked at him. All of him. The suit and the stillness and the eyes that missed nothing. And underneath all of it, the man who had grown up with an empty table and found his way to hers and waited, consistently and without complaint, for as long as it took. "Welcome," she said, "to my table." She walked back to the kitchen. He picked up his coffee. He took a sip. He was, for the second time in his life, completely at peace. There is a version of this story that is about a dangerous man and the woman who softened him. That is not this story. This is a story about two people who learned, through the specific and unglamorous work of small moments, that being seen is not the same as being known, and that being known is not the same as being safe, and that the truest kind of safety is not the absence of risk, but the presence of someone who will sit at your table regardless of what they find there. Kim Jae-won spent 12 years building walls out of power because a 7-year-old boy learned that showing want was the same as showing weakness. What he found at table 4 was not a person who needed him to be less than he was. He found someone who was unafraid of what he was and more interested in who he was. And those are entirely different things. And the difference between them is the difference between managing a person and trusting one. Deja Collins spent her whole life being the person who handled things. Not because she didn't need help, but because needing help had always felt like the thing that would finally make her too much, or not enough, or both at once. What she found at table 4 was not a man who fixed her problems. She found someone who watched her carry everything alone and stayed at the table anyway, and who, once, quietly, without conditions, held the door open and waited to see if she would walk through it when she was ready. She was ready when she was ready. That mattered. The diner still runs. Miss Carroll is still at the register at 7 sharp. Janelle still talks too much and means well. Marcus still communicates through the sound of pans. Table 4 is still the best table on the floor. And somewhere across the city, a restaurant is open, built on 14 revisions of a dream and one decision to finally stop protecting it from the possibility of being real. The lesson, if there is one, is this: the things you keep in a drawer because you're not ready to look at them don't go away. They wait. And the people who are worth something will still be there when you're finally ready to open the drawer. And sometimes the most dangerous thing in your life is not the thing you were afraid of. It is the table you almost didn't sit down at. Thank you for spending your time with this story. Truly, every comment, every share, every subscription is what makes it possible to keep building these worlds and these people and these quiet, complicated, human moments. If this story moved you in any way, if you saw yourself in Deja's stubbornness or Kim's stillness or in the particular loneliness of a person who has been carrying things alone for too long, then it did exactly what a story is supposed to do. That is entirely because of you showing up to the end. Table 4. Thursday mornings. The usual. That's how it starts. That's what it stays. That's everything.